I'm sorry, Kirk, but I think I gave myself a 9 on that clap, just so you know. That was a pretty good clap. So here was Robert. Okay, he traveled up here to record with us today. We talked in Colorado and had a podcast. Okay, we talked about the stage 1 setup with plant hormones. Now we're here, and I know we said there was a part 2. We've recorded some with Pretzer. We also talked about product videos, and we got those product videos done. They will be on YouTube that are 10 to 20 minutes. Now, I personally felt in those clips, between all those products that we went across, we kind of filled in the gaps of hormones and what to focus on.
Yes.
So we're here today, agronomist to agronomist, talking about phosphorus. And I think we'll start diving into that, and I'll have input along the way, but I'm really excited for this conversation because I think it's an element that needs more. There's a lot of generalization with the element. We talked about University of Illinois' data. I mean, if you look at the uptake charts, I mean, when you look at those nutrients, there's times to apply, or times that would be the most effective and most efficient to apply versus other methods. So,
yeah, that's some of the best fertilizer studies and data that's been published. I mean, since the greats, since Malick and Bray were running around.
Yeah, you don't know how many times I stare at that just over and over again.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Which I think kind of leads into the part of where we were talking about with phosphorus, because general practice right now, most of your phosphorus is up ahead or even in the fall, early spring. Okay.
Yeah, because it doesn't go anywhere.
Well, yeah. It doesn't move very much in the soil. Now, with that being said, when the plant truly needs it, where the levels are the highest, are when, Robert?
In the end, you're absolutely in a reproductive phase, and you're going out even towards a dry down phase.
Yep.
When you're seeing the most need and the highest use of that nutrient.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not going to argue it's essential. You know, it is an essential nutrient, but we're using a lot of it early, and I think at the rates we're using it, it's actually it's very stressful to that plant.
Now, why is it stressful?
I mean, it's stressful to the system as a whole, but I mean, just walk in the fields. If you look at maybe a 1034O application next to, let me kind of position this here. I'm more a nitrogen guy, and I'll definitely lean heavier on amine nitrogen. That led me down the path of amino acids. I've been doing work with amino acids most of my career, using them as supportive nitrogen sources. You can grow very nice crops with UAN, even urea. I'm a fan of these because they're one step closer to the protein. From the nitrate standpoint, every time you convert a chemical, it either costs or releases energy.
Yes.
So it's costing energy to have to put these things all together. There is a place for phosphorus, and I do think in the beginning, for seed establishment, it is still useful. But when we're trying to front load all of our phosphorus onto the seed, it's just too much chemical for that little seed to handle from a plant physiology standpoint. I think we're pissing the plant off.
Well, and I'd also make an argument too. I mean, I'd be the first one to say there's definitely situations, and if your phos numbers are low, I mean, the most efficient way to get that plant to have enough phosphorus, high calcium comes to mind. Okay, high calcium soils, we know, or high calcium, high pH, we know that phosphorus is going to tie up with that calcium.
Always.
It's just the honest truth. Okay, so if you're able to do something in a band, okay, what you're doing is increasing the concentration so it's harder for that calcium to bind.
You're overwhelming the abundance of calcium. And then if you really want to make matters worse, think of the irrigation water. How many fields do we walk and there's no irrigation water test? So we're finding if you start calculating an acre inch of that water in terms of tonnage, I mean, you're applying so much calcium and bicarb to the field, you're never going to have available phosphorus.
Well, and in irrigation country too, we are applying an inch of water. Pretty soon, our water is our soil.
It is.
I mean, it just honestly is because of that fact.
Weight by weight. There's more.
Yeah.
Because if you think the root zone, I know you get these root digs and boy, I got a 12-foot root system here. But in reality, the majority of your roots are in a very shallow layer of ground.
Yep.
So you could very easily overcome that with your irrigation water in pivot country and things like that.
Well, and going back to Phos, we were talking about, I'm still a fan of having some in-furrow.
I like a little.
Because, at the end of the day, that first, I just go back to that first drink and what phosphorus does. I mean, ATP, getting energy. For us to get a good emergent stand, we want all those plants cranking from that first drink.
Yeah.
And if that soil is lacking phos or it's not releasing because the soil temperature is too cold. Okay?
Oh, that's another big one.
Well, it just comes to the part of phosphorus and furrow in proportion makes a lot of sense. Now, if we get past that part and talk about when does that plant actually use the rest of that phos, well, heck, yeah, later in the year, but then the argument always is, how are you supposed to get it into the root zone? Because it doesn't move. Now, you can make the arguments of foliar feeding, and I think it's Nature's, has something on their flyer that 1 pound of phos foliar is equivalent to 20 pounds in the ground.
I mean,
there's probably some truth to it.
There's probably some truth to that.
It's a study from Michigan State that was done in the 70s or 80s.
I can speak to it more from a micronutrient standpoint, and we see similar efficiency factors with, a chelated micronutrient fertilizer. I'm not talking about getting zinc sulfate and making your own mix, but when you get a real chelate, you're seeing roughly that 10-to-1 efficiency factor as well.
Okay. So that's opportunity for management when it comes to phos.
Yeah, and I think you have to go back to your cold soils as well.
Yeah.
So early corn always comes up purple. And a lot of times my phosphorus in the soil is more than adequate. And a lot of that is just the soil is cold, the biology is not working yet, it's not cycling the phosphorus well, the fungi in particular are asleep, and that's why you're getting purpling. It's not because you didn't apply the phosphorus.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. And then also I think about two, we talk about a lot of studies, like you mentioned about your 1034-0 study that you had, where some of the effects of the biology was a very negative effect to it at the time, right?
And not because 1034-0 is bad, it's a very high salt content.
Yes.
And that's very harsh to little organisms that grow in water layers in the soil.
Yeah.
So, we do find a lot of knockback, I guess, of the 1034-0. And then just like the most notable example is soybean and the rhizobia and the nodule. Soybeans need nitrogen. Soybeans respond from nitrogen fertilizer. I mean, hands down. But if you apply too much, you start to hurt the nodule, and then the nodule can't provide the 2/3 of the nitrogen that it needs to, and then your whole system collapses. Phosphorus and fungi are very similar.
Yep.
So a lot of our natural phosphorus is in the soil, and it is going to be provided through this surface area. The surface area is the root system. It's capturing more. But the surface area is also the fungal associations with the ground biology and the root. So it makes you more surface area, a bigger system, so to speak.
Yes.
So if you're using too much available phosphorus, those organisms that cycle phosphorus, they're going to shut down, just like a rhizobium nodule.
All right, guys, we are dropping multiple mini-series on YouTube going over crop management, farm management, all kinds of stuff on the farm.
Yes.
Lots of information. Check it out. It's good stuff.
We'll see you there.
When I get to the point like there, it's definitely, it matters what that concentration is what it's triggering it, right?
Yeah.
So in like that situation, something to look at and something I like, and I'd say there's some research that supports it, is adding those carbon-based products to help buffer salts, number one. I mean, it is going to buffer salts.
It hides salt.
Yes, it's going to hide salt.
It'll even trick your EC meter. Like, it's really hiding the salt.
Yeah, so if you're hiding the salt there, then almost masking, like you have the fertility there, but it's almost putting a mask cover to have more of a slow release of it.
It does make it slow release. I don't think we have to quietly foot around that one, right?
Yeah.
It is making it a slow release because it's a chelate.
Yeah.
And a carbon, a humic, a sugar, amino, and then even on the far end of the extreme, like an EDTA, what they are is
100%.
claws, they're
Yep.
wraps,
Yep.
they wrap the charge, and salt is measured by that charge. So you're literally reducing the saltiness of the solution.
Which, when you do that, does help biology, but also helps the plant, right? So if we get
Plants
these,
don't like salts.
well, yeah. So if you're chelating them, making them less abundant per se, the plant it's more friendlier.
Yeah,
to
the plant doesn't know it's there.
Yeah.
And then biology starts to chew on it, starts to eat some of that carbon, and now suddenly we're slowly releasing these nutrients.
Well, now you have almost like a biologically chelation because they're consuming it, excreting it out. I mean,
That's
There's-
truly biologically available once
Yeah.
it's passed through an organism.
yeah.
This is one of the fundamentals I learned about soil health and soil organic matter. You know what stupid me, it's like, oh, that must be the residue, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I could see some black in here. The majority of your soil organic matter is the biology. And when you cook the sample, you kill that. That is the carbon. That is sustainable organic carbon.
Okay. So, phosphorus in that time, I think we've kind of hit the things that we can do early on. We're not saying it's not important, and if your soil
is
sample,
important,
if your soil sample's saying you're low on phos,
Add
you are gonna see a yield response.
Absolutely.
Okay? With that in mind, though, one thing I always look at too is like, where's that number at? When it goes to ppms of Bray or ppms of Malik. I think we can have arguments here, but one thing I go back to is I look at university data, and then once you get above that 25, 35 number ppm P1s, I think they have 85% of the time you're not going to see a response.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So it's just one of those things. I mean, if you're sitting below a 20, or if you're even below a 15, heck, if you're below a 10 for sure, you're probably going to see benefits from a banned Phos application to make that more sustainable. I don't even want to use sustainable. To make that more plant friendly, more biologically friendly.
Yeah, get a better return on investment.
Utilize carbon.
Oh,
Some
absolutely.
way, shape, or form with that band of phosphorus.
Another place I usually see good results is on sands. If I'm in pretty sandy
Yes.
soils,
Yep.
I typically get a response out of my phosphorus. And if I add carbon, I can get more. And then the other thing, we've been talking all day about hormones, and hormones are absolutely meaningless alone. It doesn't matter how much cytokinin you have. It's your ratio of these things to the other hormones. It's those 5 hormones collectively that are the brains of the plant, and their ratios are what's making the decision on how to respond to the environment. Now, it might not be that complicated with nutrients, but all of those nutrients that you're testing in your soil, or I'll even take it one step further into your tissue and saps, it's not always the amount, the ppm of that nutrient in the plant. It's the balance of that nutrient to everything else. So when we hit with a 1030-40, we almost 100% of the time induce a zinc deficiency.
If you're not adding it, well, you can
Yeah,
even make the argument the amount of zinc that you'd have to add.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
Because
So,
you
like-
have an overabundance of concentration.
So yeah, and if my soil and my base sats are through the roof with unbalanced calcium, then it's gonna be really hard to apply enough phosphorus. So that's gonna affect my rates as well.
Yeah.
If my calcium is more balanced, I can get away with much less phosphorus. So it's there's no straight answer. It's,
And it's kind of nice. I mean, 1034, 318, low salts, Phos inputs. Let's just put it that way. Banded Phos inputs. I always like adding zinc just to help get that ratio closer. Now, you could probably spend yourself silly trying to make that ratio perfect.
Yeah, probably.
But with that, doing a pint rate if the gallons are lower, doing a quart rate gets it closer. So when that plant takes a drink from that band, it actually has zinc to help open the doors to phosphorus.
Yes.
At the end of the day. So with that being said, when would you want to apply most of your phosphorus if you had all the tools in the toolbox for an operation?
I mean, I'm not going to underestimate in the phosphorus, in most environments, cold soils, phosphorus limiting soils, I would want to apply a little bit as close to the seed as I possibly could. So that first drink that you're talking about is at least abundant
Yep.
in phosphorus. So when that plant wakes up and imbibes its solution, its water, it's going to sense it. Plants are very smart, seeds too, and they're going to sense the environment around it, and it's going to control its entire life now from that sense.
Yeah.
There's genetics. I don't want to get too crazy. The seedsman comes and he talks to you about all this different genetics. But there's machinery inside the seed that's going to transcribe and translate and turn this genetic information into a plant. And that machinery is going to respond at a certain rate. It's an epigenetic effect.
Yep.
So if we're germinating the best seed in the world in a poor environment, the rate at which it is transcribing is going to be much slower than if we germinate the same seedling in a highly productive environment.
Yeah.
So you need enough, at least early on, to trick that seed into thinking it's in a productive environment,
Yep.
to give you a chance to grow those record yields. Because if you just start out malnourished, I mean, you're gonna be a scrawny adult.
Well, and it goes to the point. I'm trying to keep it balanced here about maybe not going too far down the science rabbit hole, but still being within check and talking about stuff that needs to be talked about. It's like phenotype versus genotype.
Oh yeah,
Okay,
they
so-
get mad when I use those words.
Yeah, so like phenotype is the physical expression.
Absolutely.
Okay, genotype is what's in the DNA. Okay, my dad's bald. Okay, I'm balding. My phenotype is I'm bald, and also my genotype is I'm balding. Okay, you get to the sense of, let's just say if I had a brother and he had a full head of hair, he probably still has the genetics for balding, but his phenotype or whatever he's gone through, those stressors may not have happened.
Exactly.
So he's not expressing it.
Didn't turn that on.
Exactly. It didn't turn it on. So you go back to having that in-furrow, and talking about making sure that seed is turning on the phenotype that we want. Because it can have the best genetics in the world, but like you said, if it's malnourished and it doesn't feel like it's in a good position, it's not going to get, I don't want to say aggressive, but it's not just going to keep pushing forward.
Absolutely.
Okay?
No, absolutely.
I mean, that's why it's so important to know that sometimes year by year, the natural stressors that happen in an environment are messing with that phenotype, and that phenotype has more to the yield than the genotype. I personally feel there's a lot of great genotypes out there in the world of agriculture.
Oh,
There is some amazing genotypes.
and they're not lying.
Yeah.
Those genetics are
Yeah.
cool.
But with that, if the situation and Mother Nature, the hand that we're being dealt, made a phenotype with those genetics, it's not the genetics' fault to a point of Mother Nature turned the wrong keys and opened the wrong door.
Absolutely.
You get what I'm trying to
Absolutely.
go there? But with that, if we were able to use a starter fertilizer and or just making sure our Phos levels are correct, okay, and we look like that soil is releasing everything or stimulating, I don't know if I want to say falsifying, but almost giving that false reading, and then it just starts triggering. I mean, I got done checking, my acres this last week. And one thing that blew my mind, I have one gentleman, he does a low salt fertilizer, zinc, manganese, calcium, a little bit of mag, sugar. I mean, he does it. And the difference in that radical root system,
Oh, it's amazing, isn't it?
it is unreal. But with that being said, okay, I also know I can make a radical root look very pretty, but if we get a hailstorm, my yield's going to be not that good.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
but what he's willing to do with that in-furrow program to see that radical root system, and then before even V1, we already have our nodals coming.
Nice.
You just have that plant set up. It thinks in that band, it's going to go.
Yeah,
and that's what it's trying
absolutely.
to do, because we are putting an environment to express the correct genotype we want to see,
Absolutely. Yeah.
which turns into that phenotype.
Yeah. And your biggest thing, I remember we had to measure this. I have a degree in breeding and genetics, and we had to prove the stability of our genes.
Okay.
And this was the hardest thing, and we called it the G by E interaction.
Okay.
And it was your genetic by the environment. And in the end, that's the stability of the phenotype that you're talking about. But in any case, we have to always push for the best genetics, the best expression of that. And, if that the storm comes, we'll deal with that later. But we can't go into the season thinking we're going to get a hailstorm, or we'd be idiots to plant anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, it's good to maximize that, and it hedges our bets moving forward.
Yeah, so applying Phos later season, I go to my mind. We talked about how bicarbonates are a problem, how calcium, overabundance of calcium, okay, we can see problems there with Phos release within the soil.
Yeah, I see more issues with water quality than I do with soil quality most of the time.
What are some ways to solve that? Or in your opinion, what would be effective ways to try to move the needle there? Because I think to myself, there's sometimes that pivot's going, we're putting on an inch 20, so that pivot's going on 3 times that week, 4 times that week.
Oh, yeah, and you're not in the same environment. I have the luxury of being able to travel all over the world and work with different crops and different farmers. One of the places I spent a lot of time, I used to teach, was out in California.
Okay.
And out west and I know Midwest guys don't want to hear about California. Although, let me tell you, there's some corn yield records out of the Central Valley. I didn't believe it until I went out there. I was like, no way. And some of these guys are still flood irrigating. So, California's 2 different places, let me tell you.
Okay.
You getting into the valley, you got some cool stuff going on out there. But anyway, out there, and a lot of times we are dealing with higher value crops, and into Arizona, Yuma Valley, we're not playing around. We'll put sulfuric acid or phosphoric acid tanks right there.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We'll treat this right into the irrigation, and we just blast the bicarbonate right out of the water before it's even going into your field.
Okay.
I've actually I've expressed this to Florida farmers. I've expressed this to Nebraska farmers, Kansas farmers. They tell me I'm crazy. This is like a West Coast thing. We've even seen organic farmers do it with these machines that they're called sulfur burners.
Okay.
So I can't add sulfuric acid to my system if I'm organic. No. I have to get sulfur flour, light it on fire, make my own sulfuric acid, and then I could do it. But that's a whole nother discussion here.
Yep.
So and I understand, in some of these row crops, the value of the crop does not justify the acid tank. In rural Nebraska, you do not have the infrastructure to even deliver acids around like this, so let's get away from it.
Yeah.
One of the things we have done in some places, I'm an old acid fertilizer guy. Some of my teachers, they actually patented that stuff back in the 70s and 80s. And we'll use a lot of nitrogen sources that are derived from acids. So we're using stuff like sulfuric and dissolving urea right into it, making different blends like that, using that as our starter material, trying to dissolve some of this right in the soil. Trying to blast away some of that calcium that's locking up my phosphorus right in the furrows and in the side dresses and things like that. So that's very helpful. I think from a widespread, everybody can do it. We may not be able to control our irrigation water. That's 27,000 gallons.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of water. But you have absolutely no excuse not to focus on your spray tank. I'll tell you right now, in this high bicarb water, you are getting maybe 10% efficacy out of glyphosate when you're mixing this right into the tank. You can very easily, and micronutrients aren't as bad as glyphosate, it's known to bind, but you could very easily treat your tank. Number one way to do it, we're adding citric or lactic acid right to the tank, bringing that pH down into a 6 range, 6.5. Very easy to do in a spray tank. Another really good way that we've been doing it is with fulvic or humic acids, depending on what we're adding.
Okay.
So maybe we're acidifying with some of that urea sol that I was talking about.
Yep.
Yeah, because that's got a low pH. Or like a lactic acid, amino acid. We'll get an amino that's broken down with a lactobacillus, so it's really high in lactic acid.
Okay.
Something like that can lower the pH. I like to use a urea phosphate. I use like a 5-10-27 with a full trace package. That'll bring you down to that 4 range real quick.
Okay.
These are very strong acids. When we're using different chemicals, a fulvic acid, it's not super acidic. Some of the fulvic acids are actually neutral.
Yeah.
But fulvic acid is a chelate, and it's much cleaner than a humic acid. I like humic, and if you can get away with humic, go for it because it's cheaper. You have a lot of other benefits like to the soil and all this other stuff. But fulvic acid, I can mix things. I can mix that high calcium.
The mixability is so much easier.
The foliar uptake.
Yes.
You're literally chelating the nutrients. So it's just like buying a chelated fertilizer is going to be 10 times more efficient than zinc sulfate salt. And similar. Now, you don't have a fertilizer factory, so don't expect 10 times the efficiency, but you're making the same steps.
Yeah.
From a simple thing that everyone's doing, and I like it too for the nitrogen, is AMS.
Okay.
You know, so depending on what's in the water making it dirty, AMS is a way to add nitrogen and condition the tank to make the herbicides work better.
Yeah.
Something like that's very helpful.
Well, and even like in our areas, I mean, AMS, and there's acidifiers on the market for the spray tank too.
Yeah, citric acid with fulvic, perfect.
Yeah. So something I look into, maybe I should focus in on the question more for pivot irrigation. You talked about the sulfuric acid, phosphoric acid. Do you think there's an opportunity to, or maybe we're dealing with too much water, to take a triple 20 and help that knock bicarbonates within the irrigation
Oh, it
water?
Absolutely would help. A triple 20 or something like, particularly on that urea phosphate type chemistry.
Okay.
You might see it in I've seen things like 10-55, 10, if you were looking for the phosphorus, a triple 20. I like a 5-5-45 later in the season.
Okay.
But all of these are pretty acidic formulations. I do think you can get down in the 2 range if you're super saturating a tote.
Okay.
And then injecting this is going to help. All of it is pushing you into an acidic world. I know we have to live with a pH of 7.5, 8.5 sometimes, but the plant's looking in that 6.5 range.
Well, yeah. Well, and the plant, the rhizosphere, the plants can adjust that pH to where they kind of need it within there. So Mother Nature's smart. The plant knows how to live in certain conditions. But with that, I think to myself, can you take let's just say triple 20, or what'd you say, a 5-5-45?
Yeah, the one that I've been using a lot of is a 5-10-27.
Okay, so 5-10-27.
And it's super acidic.
I mean, if you're able to blend that with, arguably probably RO water in the perfect world, and put that in a 1,000-gallon tank right by the pivot, and then just inject it. Yes, probably do a titration test if you wanted to get exact.
Yeah.
But I think to myself,
I don't think we have to be exact.
Well, and I think
any little bit helps.
Yes, any little bit helps. And I think to myself, if we know that pivot's, in my area, there's a chance that pivot just stays running for 2.5, 3 weeks.
Oh yeah,
it just stays on.
Yeah.
So maybe every Monday that pass is when you're helping knock out some more bicarbonates.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because I have seen when that ground just gets so hard on top.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because of the abundance, calcium, bicarbonates, all that jazz. So if we're able to take a acid, inject it through the pivot, we're moving in the right direction.
Well, we make a line cleaner type product. I call it chelator.
Okay.
And really, it's a really high quality fulvic acid. We'll add it through there to clean out some of the bicarb in the solution.
Okay.
We've worked with different soil surfactants. We have one we've been working with we call Jackhammer. It's another acid-based product that really helps to blast the bicarbonate there. But nothing, I'm not even looking to sell something here. You want some real deal advice. A lot of these guys are super overplying gypsum. Like, we don't want the pH. I love the story. Don't want the pH to go up, but I want to condition the soil. But you've created an equilibrium that favors the gypsum. So you're not releasing any calcium. So my first recommendation to you is to get yourself a sulfur prill or a sulfur flower. Sulfur flower is going to be cheaper. It's a pain in the, but it's cheaper.
Yeah.
If that's it, Bandit. Start doing 100 pounds a year, and you'll start to work on some real changes in the soil. Another one, we had this one field, they're doing tons and tons of gypsum every single year. I mean, I don't know why. Just because it was cheap, and you want to condition the soil and you don't want to raise the pH. We're in that 8 range, 8.2, I think it was.
Okay.
In Panhandle area.
Okay.
And so we're just playing around. We're desperate, to be honest with you. We can't get any calcium into the field. And so some guy, we start looking at it. We had some calcium carbonate that we were working with. And in the agronomy book, you don't use calcium carbonate on basic ground. Never. Why would you do that? It's stupid. We put, it was a couple 100 pounds of this calcium carbonate down, and we freed up more calcium with that application than we did with tons of gypsum.
Wow.
Sulfur was expensive in that area. We couldn't do the sulfur. There were some reasons there. But that one, yeah, exactly. Wow. That one sent me back to the desk. And I'm starting to play around with the chemical formulas and the stoichiometry and all these names and stuff that I didn't even want to remember. What we did, if you're in a gypsum calcium sulfate where that's the favored equilibrium, and you keep adding calcium sulfate, gypsum, it's staying on this side. When we added the calcium carbonate, it was able to add more calcium to break the equilibrium and start freeing up some of the bound up gyp.
Gotcha.
And then I start reading about pH. pH is a weird scale.
Yes, it is.
It's not a ruler.
Yep.
And the closer you are to the balance, the harder and harder and harder it becomes to change. But when I'm on these far ends, it becomes a lot easier to kind of manipulate a little bit.
Yep.
And that 0.2 was enough to free up calcium to really stop our problem.
That is crazy.
And then, worst comes to worst, and I know this one, I'm a foliar guy. I still argue with scientists over the effects of foliar, and it's ridiculous. So we were talking about corporate agronomists that are working major companies here, and there's no proven research that foliars work. That's bullshit. You absolutely can measure an effect of a foliar application, and I think I've said it a few times today. The soil is like an ocean. So when all else fails and you have an excuse for everything to fix the soil, avoid the soil. I don't want to sound anti-soil health. I've been soil health king. I've been regenerative lately. I bought a microscope. I'm into this.
Yeah.
But when you are in those environments where nothing else will work, go foliar.
Well, exactly. And if your challenge is within your soil profile, because there's going to be some situations where it's going to break the bank for you to try to correct and totally balance that soil.
Oh, absolutely.
So instead of worrying about that, manage around it. So one thing I get to is in my area, our parts per million is higher than our mag. So we can have a mag deficiency.
You will have a mag deficiency everywhere. It doesn't matter what you do. I was teaching in California for a little while. I was in the Central Coast.
Yep.
San Luis Obispo. Beautiful place on earth. And I learned geology, not because I wanted to. We were growing wine grape on serpentine soils. I don't even know what serpentine is, so you buy a new book, you read this book. Serpentine is a parent rock for magnesium. So our calcium to mag ratios were reversed. And it didn't matter what you did, you could never get calcium into a root. It all had to be foliar applied.
Okay.
That's kind of what got me into this. I'm a chloride guy, too. I know you got to be careful.
Yep.
But chlorides are amazing sources of free ions.
Fair enough.
Amazing sources.
That's a good way to put it.
Yes, they're salty.
Yeah. Well, and if you go way overboard, it can plug the plant up if it's way overabundant.
Yeah, true.
So I just think everything in balance. It's just how
you're right. That's full circle back.
Yeah.
And it is. It's totally balanced.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because if your calcium's that high, you'll always have a mag deficiency.
Yeah.
And what's magnesium? We got hemoglobin, iron's in the middle.
Yeah.
Chlorophyll, magnesium.
Well, and kind of going back to that point of if you have that problem field, okay, let's just say soil's way out of balance. It's going to cost too much to try to get that back on track. Or maybe that's just not in the budget this year. Mm-hmm. Honestly, that field might be an opportunity for you to test foliar feeding, but of the nutrients you know you're going to be lacking.
Oh, yeah.
Because you know what? That's probably going to be your biggest ROI, because there's not starving, but they would thrive a lot better if they had a little bit of those. And like we talked about earlier, some micronutrients being 1 pound applied is the same as 10 pounds, and I'm not saying all micros, you need 10 pounds of them. I mean, I actually argue the other side, but you're stimulating in the right direction.
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of the rates that you see are, and I don't want to be anti-fertilizer or anything here, but a lot of the rates we're using, even with nitrogen, are just ridiculous. They're excessive. And the reason we have to use these rates is because of all those interactions.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you could cut these rates down by adding a little bit of labor to it, maybe an additional pass, the right placement, the right chelate, maybe adding some of your carbon to it, something like this.
Yeah.
And you're going to get much more efficiency out of it. That's one of the reasons every single farmer asks me the efficiency factor of whatever it is I have that day. Maybe it's the amino acid. Well, in some cases, this fish amino is literally 10 pounds of urea. 1 pound of this 15-1-1.
Yep.
10 pounds of urea. But in other cases, it doesn't respond like that. It's because of the balance across the board. It's a trick question for me to answer your question and say this replaces 10 quarts of zinc, because it's not always the zinc. Is it the phosphorus? Is it the calcium affecting the phosphorus, affecting the zinc? Is it the fungi in the soil that are now rotating? Is it this bacteria species that's eating it all up? Bacteria they're like bags of fertilizer.
That's
so
a good way to put it.
You need something to eat the bacteria. And
something to pull the string on the bag so you can dump it. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
So
yeah.
there's so many interactions to deal with when we're trying to calculate your nutrient budgets. It's unreal.
Yeah, well, and I know I've said this so many times. Intentionality, balance, that there will probably guide you to the products you need to get.
Yeah. And then, there are good, I know today there are some good university guys out there doing really good work.
100%.
And if we stand on their shoulders, like the Illinois guys, they've right there in that paper, and they've summarized this paper 1,000 times at 1,000 different websites. Every company has picked up this paper and tried to explain it in their benefit. So we can just look at that, and we know at certain times we need certain nutrients. And then oh boy, you got potassium through the roof, so you're never going to be able to get the magnesium. So then now we can even further it. Now we know we need magnesium at this time. We know that, calcium's going to work in this field, boron's going to work in this field, and molybdenum's going to work in this field. But we know mag's not going to work here. So now to foliar apply that mag at that timing. And then the irrigation guys, my friend John calls it the $1,000 button. That's I didn't realize that. I figured a pivot was just like a free pass around the field.
Yeah,
it's like, Rob, it's $1,000 button.
Yeah.
And he's right.
Yeah.
But we know to press the $1,000 button with the mag because we have to go a quick pass to get that out of and avoid the ocean.
Yes.
So I know I just mentioned molybdenum. Why does everybody hate molybdenum? Why is it not on any test?
You're talking about it from the lab's perspective.
What's wrong with molybdenum?
I don't know.
Molybdenum's a great tool.
Yes,
and
it
I
is.
find it deficient in a lot of agricultural soils.
Yes.
And you need nothing. You need such a tiny, tiny bit.
Well, and it's so unique too with molybdenum, how it's almost like the inverse. The more acidic, the more available it is.
Yeah.
Once you cross over, the closer you get to 6, 5, 7, it actually starts. Its availability starts getting lower too.
You know what else? Then this, I hate. Boy, we got to watch because we can go on forever in so many different rat holes. But it reminds me of silica.
Okay.
So silica, it's everywhere, but not a drop to share. And so this is where, and another thing.
Real quick, silica is the second most abundant element actually in the soil, though, correct?
Silica,
like that?
it depends on the pH.
Okay.
But
Okay.
Yeah, silica's it's in the top 3 every time.
Okay.
Yeah, aluminum too. Aluminum's everywhere. It's just controlled by pH. I mean, from a practical standpoint, calcium is absolutely everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever see calcium deficiency, but I never have it. I always see calcium deficiency, but it's never deficient on the test.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
There's been like 2 counties maybe where I've seen. So this is, I said a bad word earlier, stoichiometry, and it's how the molecules are balancing,
Yep.
and it's, that's serious, like chemistry 101 that we all like must have cheated on that test. And so that's out of the question. But there's another thing from that class that I had to learn more recently, and it's pKa. So
Okay.
there's the pH, the pOH, and each salt or molecule has this equilibrium point, basically called its pKa, and that's where you're going to have some problems in terms of its availability. So silica is a pain, to really solubilize it and work with it. We started working with it now 3 years ago, and we've been trying to. Well, we've made a liquid, we've made a granular. We mix it with other things, but your problem with silica, I can completely make monosilicic acid, the active of silica, under pH 6. And I can very easily make it again over pH like 8.2, 8.3.
Okay.
Right? Like on this side of the world. But in that 6 to 8 range, it crashes out of every solution. So it's oh boy, I'm not a chemist, I'm a field guy. And so that's taken the chemist a lot of development work to just keep it in that suspension or that true solution at biological pH.
Okay.
Anyway, but similar with molybdenum. So you'll find like toxic levels at 1 pH, but if you can adjust the pH, you're suddenly in a sweet spot. And then if you go too far over, you're suddenly in another level where it's either missing or
Okay.
toxic altogether.
Okay.
Not to get too crazy about it.
So I'm sitting here and I'm like, well, we covered Phos.
I think the title was Phosphorus, and now
Yeah.
we've discussed all 17 essentials. And
I don't know if it was
3
all
more.
17, but we definitely hit most of them. But
I think in all cases, and I mean, we can argue what's chelatable and what's not. And some things you probably don't need it. We're not chelating nitrogen, but I think it's a good idea to use a lot of these carbon sources. I think they're real easy ways for farmers, really cost-effective ways for farmers to protect the interactions between all these nutrients and make things just work better all the time.
yeah.
Not that there's a simple answer to anything, but
Well, and I think it goes back to balance and intentionality gets a person very far at the end of the day.
oh yeah,
You know.
and look at the plants.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going nuts with some of these tests now, and I love it. I'm a scientist, right?
Yep.
So I like data, but the report tells you nothing. The plant tells you everything, and then the report explains what the plant just told you. So tests in these vacuums are absurd. So
Well-
objective.
Well, Robert, I just want to share with you how appreciative I am for you to coming back onto the podcast and diving into, like I said, a little deeper dive on Phos, because there's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of topics we covered that I feel like it was just nice to get a perspective from two ag guys, two science ag guys.
No, I appreciate the invite and always being welcome back. I think the Singular team and the Ag America team have a lot of strong synergies.
Yes.
And I look forward to just, spreading as much information as we can to the market as possible.
Awesome.
I think we're a good team for that.
Yeah, well, awesome. Well, if you want to catch anything, we have the product videos that will be coming out on YouTube.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Josh came in, talked more. I'm excited to listen to your two's podcast because I actually get to consume it. So I'm ready for that. But again, thank you so much. See us on YouTube. If you're interested in products, check out the website, and we would love to get you connected. So
Absolutely.
yes, thank you all very much.
We look forward to getting in your fields.
Guys, thanks for watching the content so far. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We've got all the full-length podcasts, other video information, tutorials on there. Also on all the major podcast platforms and social media sites, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, etc. So if you like this, go ahead and check more out on all those platforms.